Hello, everyone. Um, Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining today's class. I know it's a weekend, and thank you for taking the time out. My name is Vikas, and I would be taking you through the VMware training. So I'll basically start off with the basics, wherein I'll tell you that why VMware is important, how it can help you, and we would cover basically all the things in the training. Okay. So let me first talk about that. What am I going to cover? Okay. Or before that, let me give you a quick professional introduction about myself. So I have work experience of close to about 20 years, and um, and I've been working on VMware since 2010. Okay, so it's close to about 15 years. Um, that I have been working on VMware technology. I started off working with a very old version, and I've seen a lot of changes in VMware as the technology has progressed. Yeah, and I worked as a system admin. I worked as a support engineer, and now I basically do consulting. So yeah, I've seen basically all the phases of VMware as a admin. What you can do, what you cannot do, and what the limitations are, and how things are. Okay. So that's in a nutshell about me. Okay. Now let me quickly share my screen and let me talk about that. What am I, going to talk about? Okay. So let me talk about that. So I'm sharing my machine over here, which is basically my test server. Yeah. So there we go. I have a test server over here that I've specifically created for this one. And now let me quickly talk about that. What will I be covering in this training? Okay. So I have a URL from VMware that basically defines that, what are the things that we are going to cover. Okay. So here are all the things that I would be covering. So if you talk about it, VMware as an organization has a lot of tracks now. So earlier, I mean, 10 or 15 years back, if someone did CCNA, people would think that, they have done CCNA in routing and switching. Okay. But now the times have changed. So if you do CCNA now, people do ask you that, have you done CCNA in routing, switching, wireless, voice, data center? I mean, in which stream have you done CCNA? Similarly, is the case with VMware. So VMware has basically diversed a lot. They have close to about 78 products that they are, basically, selling in the market. And these range from, they range in different technologies. So you could have AI, you could have IoT, you could have software-defined networking, you could have storage, you can talk about compute, yeah? Then you can talk about Kubernetes, okay? You can talk about a desktop as a service, okay? Desktop virtualization, they can talk to you about. They can talk about replication, they can talk about migration, they can talk about cloud, they can talk about telco, and blah, 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 blah. Okay. So the point is, VMware as a technology has actually made a lot of changes. So they are basically into everything now. So it's like a one-stop shop. You go to one vendor and you get basically all the softwares, of your requirement. So be it end user virtualization, application virtualization, desktop virtualization, compute data center, telco, banks, AI, ML workloads, anything that you talk about, they would have an answer for you. Okay. So we are basically focusing on the technology which is called data center virtualization. In a nutshell, it's called a DCV. Okay. Now think about a pizza. Okay. So when you go to any chain of pizza and when you order a pizza, so you would basically give your preference, would you like to have a veg one or a chicken one? All sorts of pizzas are out there in the world. Okay. But the base of the pizza remains the same. Okay. It's the toppings that matter, that keeps on changing. So this course, which I'm talking about, data center virtualization, Think about it as a pizza base. Okay. Whichever VMware product that you want to learn in future, whatever you want to do, be it telco, Kubernetes, desktop virtualization, application virtualization, replication, running VMware on cloud, running it at the on-prem, anything you think about it, everything runs on the pizza base. What is the pizza base? Pizza base is data center virtualization. On top of this, you basically, keep adding, whatever you want to. But this is the basics, that you will have to, basically go through. Okay. So I am basically focusing on the pizza base over here. Okay. So I am basically focusing on that you get to understand how VMware exactly works in the background, how the basic setup is, and then of course you can keep adding on top of it. Okay. We have got several trainings, that we can share with you, wherein after doing this visa-based course, I mean, you can, learn more about VMware products like NSX, ALB, and all the sort of, trainings, we can provide you. Yeah. So now, when it comes to the data center virtualization, so this is basically called a vSphere. What a vSphere is, think about it as a bundle. Think about it as a name. Okay. So this is what we will be covering over here. So they have basically given an outline. So they are basically saying that if you want to take an official training of data center virtualization, these are the topics that you should be aware of. Okay. So the first one talks about the introduction, an overview, how would you install an ESXi, what it is, why do you need a vCenter, networking, storage, how do you create a virtual machine, how do you manage them. Then it talks about clusters, it talks about then managing and upgrading the environment. Okay. So all these 10 topics which are mentioned over here in the official training, we will be covering each and every point. Okay. There is nothing in the, over here in this official training that we will not be covering. Okay. Now, VMware has recently made a change. That is, earlier to appear for the VMware exam, you had to go through this official training wherein you had to pay a huge amount and then only you could appear for the examination. Now, VMware has changed that. So all that you have to do now is that, whenever you feel comfortable, you can appear for the exam directly. Okay. This is what you can do. So I'll show you a link wherein it has changed now. They've changed the wording now. So let me show that to you. So here is a link. When you go over here, this is the certification that we are talking about. Now here it says if you do not have any VCP certification, if you're new to it, you see the term over here. Okay, the terminology that they are using is recommended. We are recommending you to have experience. We are recommending you to attend one of the trainings, but it's not a required thing. Okay. Earlier, it used to be all required. They used to say very clearly that you have to take this training and then you can appear for the exam. Now, of course, exam is the required thing that you have to pass for it, but these two things are the recommended ones. So it's not necessary now that you have to appear for the official training and then only you can give the certification. Whenever you feel comfortable learning the technology, you can go for it. Okay. So this is what I am going to cover. And this is the related certification that I am going to teach you about it. Yeah. All right, moving on. Now, I would like to, also let you know all that if you have any questions at any point of time, okay, please do not hold back your questions. I am here to answer your queries. Okay, you are here to learn the technology. So if you find any term that you do not understand while I'm telling you, if there's anything that you do not understand, please feel free to unmute yourself, interrupt me there and then, and get your doubt cleared. Okay. End of the day, this training is for you. Okay. If you do not understand what I am teaching you or what I'm explaining you, the training does not make any sense. Yeah. So please, let's make it interactive. If you have any
Okay.
questions at any point of
Sir,
time, go for it.
I have a question
Go for it.
regarding that certification.
Hmm.
Recently Broadcom can acquire the VMware. Then
Hmm.
after a certain certification is changed, uh,
Hmm.
who have done the VCP in
Hmm.
2020 already, and now
Hmm.
their package is also changed. VMware, I hear about that.
Hmm.
VMware Foundation something is come now. They
Hmm.
uh, and I see some guys are doing that foundation course also. What that
Hmm.
is it a same course or is it a different BCP and
You
VMware?
are basically talking about licensing. So after the acquisition of Broadcom, they have made changes in the licensing, and that is what you're referring to. As we go along, I will tell you what the licensing model is, how it looks like, and what the options are. Okay. But the one that you're referring to is basically the licensing model that you're referring to.
Okay,
Okay.
that means the Broadcom after acquiring the certification morality is not changing.
No. So they're not changing that. It's only the certifications, they are changing. Apart from that, everything else remains the same. I mean, they have only said now that you do not have to pay anything additional to for the licensing for the course. Apart from that, they are saying that you can go for the exam directly. They have basically, they have basically done away with the required training. Okay.
Okay, now we don't need to attend the mandatory to training. That means.
Correct. The official training is not mandatory now. That is why you see recommended written over here. If you don't want to attend the training, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so moving on. So let me talk about that why virtualization. Okay, let me answer the question that why you should be learning the virtualization. What is the benefit? Okay, so let me take you back in time. Let's take an example. We are in 2005. Okay, hypothetical scenario. Let's say that you are in 2005, as a year. Now, what would happen is if you were in 2005, during this time, virtualization was not very prominent. I mean, people were not using the virtualization for production environments. It was there, but it was not very effective. People were basically running as physical environment. Okay. Everyone had a physical environment, that they were running on. Now, the question is, if you run only a physical environment, you are bound to run into some challenges. What those challenges are, let me highlight those challenges. Okay. So the first challenge that you will run into is that you will have to buy a lot of hardware, which is basically capex. That is, if you have an organization and if someone comes up to you, you being a system administrator, and they ask you to give you a Windows 2003 machine. Let's say in 2005, you had Windows 3000, 2003 as an operating system available. So they would say that, give me a Windows 2000 machine. I need to do some testing. I need to do something. Okay. You would say that, I do not have a spare host. I do not have a spare hardware. Where would I install the operating system? So you need to have a lot of hardware available with you as a spare, to give someone the ability to try out something. If you did not have spare hardware, you basically had to buy the hardware. So for buying the hardware, when you will call up HP and you will tell HP that, I need a hardware with certain amount of cores, with certain amount of RAM, HP will ask for money. I mean, they're not going to give it, to you for free. They will ask you for some money. Now, who's going to pay that amount? It's not going to be you and me. We are not going to pay that amount from our, own monthly salary. Of course, it will be from the IT's budget. Okay. So who is going to pay for that? It's the company. So it's the capex, the capital expenditure is on the company's head. Okay. It's their responsibility to procure the hardware. So capex is one of the things, that you will have a lot of problems as an organization if you're only running a physical environment. The second problem that you will have is basically OPEX. That is, if you buy 3,000 physical boxes, you need space, you need cooling, you need electricity, you need a proper bandwidth, to make sure that all those 3,000 boxes are available for you. You cannot keep all those 3,000 boxes in your office. You cannot keep them at home. There is a dedicated place you have to keep them, and that dedicated place is basically a data center. So you need to basically pay the data center guy. So you've bought the hardware. Now to run and maintain that hardware, you basically need to get space from the data center, and that is where you're going to keep the hardware. And data center is going to send you a monthly bill that, here I am hosting your 3,000 boxes. This is what you need to pay me for cooling, electricity, and air conditioning audit, and whatever it is, they will charge you that amount. Okay. Then you need to hire a lot of people because 3,000 physical boxes, you would have hard drives failing, you would have power supplies going out. So you need to have folks in your team who can also manage this environment. Okay. So you need to have a monthly expense also to manage this 3,000 boxes. Okay. The other issue that you will run into if you are running a dedicated VMware environment would be about utilization. Okay. So let's take an example that you have a physical machine. Okay, let's take an example over here that I have a physical HP server over here. And this physical HP server, for example, has 50 GB RAM. Okay. Now my application, let's take an example. I've got Nginx over here. Okay. And this application is only utilizing, let's say, 20 GB of RAM. I have 50 GB RAM on my hardware, but I'm only utilizing 20 GB RAM. Okay. What do I do with the remaining 30 GB RAM? How do I utilize the 30 GB RAM? I mean, there is nothing that you can do because you will not keep opening up your physical boxes, taking out the memory card and putting it in a different machine and basically keep swapping the cards. I mean, that is something that is not physically possible. Okay. So with a physical machine, there is a challenge that if you are not utilizing the resources, there is nothing that can be done about it. You cannot share those resources with other physical machines. That's the limitation that we have today. Okay. So with a physical environment, whatever the CPU memory that you have, only that can be utilized with the physical machine that it is on. Okay. If that machine is not utilizing it, there is nothing that we can do about it. Okay. So utilization is another challenge that you will have if you are running only a physical environment. Okay. The other challenge that you will run into is basically lifecycle management. Now, what is lifecycle management? Lifecycle management basically means that after 5 years, you have to throw away the box and get a new one. Okay. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you have an HP server. Okay. You got this HP server, let's say in 2017. Okay. Now, in 2017, when you got the server, you were running Windows 2012 as an operating system over here, and things were looking okay. HP did give you drivers and firmwares for their hardware, and you were able to install the operating systems, and things were looking absolutely fine. There were no challenges over there. Okay. But now, let's take an example that your company decides that we will be upgrading our operating systems. So, for example, to 2022 as an operating system. Windows 2022 as an operating system. Now, when you will call up HP and you will tell HP that I need drivers for an operating system Windows 2022, they would say that your hardware is close to about 8 years old. This is end of life, and we will not be able to provide you with the drivers. So you would ask that what is the workaround? They would say the workaround is throw away the box and get a new one. On a new hardware, you would be able to install Windows 2022, but on the old hardware, we would not be able to support you with that. Okay. So every vendor company basically will give you the hardware for a certain amount of years. It has a shelf life. After that, date is not there, after that time has gone, they would basically ask you to throw away the box and get a new one. Now, when you have to throw away that box in your data center, mind you, you have to pay for it. Okay. You are not going to get anything in return. I mean, in India, I mean, folks who are not in India, there is a concept, when you give something out, as your, waste, or, if you have a lot of old newspapers, or you have got old, things at your home. If you go to any pawn shop, like, you have in other countries, You give something and you get your money. Okay. Over here in data center, that's not the case. When you have to throw away your old physical boxes, your old servers, you are basically paying for it. You are not going to get anything in return. Okay. So you have to basically reach out to a disposal vendor who is ISO certified. You will give them the details of the boxes that you have to throw. They will give you a bill. You pay that amount. They will come at your facility, pick up the boxes, send you an email that, we have disposed that hardware. And that email you can use in the IT audit. So when your IT is getting audited, you can tell the auditor all the old boxes have been disposed properly, and here is an email from a certified vendor confirming the same. Okay. So this is what you will have to do. Now, when you get the new box, you have to install the operating system, restore the data, put the application back, verify the connectivity. So you have to do a lot of things. Okay. And it's not fun to do it. Trust me, you might like it once or twice, but after, 2 or 3 times, I mean, trust me, it's no fun. You will not like doing that activity again and again. Okay. The other problem that you have is provisioning time. So let's take an example. Anyone comes up to you and randomly they tell you that I need, for example, a Windows machine. Give it to me now. You would say that I do not have a physical box. How can I give you a Windows machine? I need to get approval from the boss. Then I would place the order. Once I get the hardware, I have to rack and stack. I have to install the operating system, get it on the network, and then I would be able to provide you with the operating system. That might take a month or a two. So if you have to provision a new operating system, it will basically take a lot of time because you have to procure, you have to go through the process a lot of time. Okay. That is the other challenge that you will have to run into if you are running only a physical environment. Okay. The other challenge that you will have is basically about downtime. So let's take an example that you have a physical box in your data center. Okay. And let's take an example, both the power supplies on the hardware have basically failed. So let's say I've got two power supplies over here. Okay. And let's say both of them have failed. Now, the problem is today is a Thursday. And as an example, okay, you call up HP and you tell them that, my power supplies have failed, my server is down, and I want you to send someone and quickly get the power supply replaced. HP will say, buddy, it's already 5 p.m. And if I look at your contract, you have only signed up for a basic contract. You did not sign up for a mission critical contract. You did not sign up for the next business day contract. So you paid very less amount to us in terms of signing the contract. So tomorrow is a Friday. Tomorrow is a public holiday. We are not working. Saturday, Sunday is a weekend. We do not work. I can send you the engineer. I can send the engineer along with the parts only on a Monday. Okay. So think about it. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 3 days, your server is down. And there is nothing that you can do about it because you do not make hardware parts. No, you have to ask HP to give you the hardware parts. And the kind of contract that you have signed does not allow HP to send the engineer right away. So your machine is now down for next 3 days. Okay. So this is the other challenge that you have. With the physical machines, you basically run into a lot of hardware issues if you do not have a proper contract. If you had a proper contract, HP would have sent the engineer right away. But again, that involves the money. Okay. So the other problem that you have is basically with downtime. Okay. And the last option that you have, the challenge that you will run into with a physical environment is basically about scalability. Okay. What does that mean? So for example, I come up to you and I say that I need 500 new Windows servers. Give it to me now. Would you be able to give me 500 physical boxes now? No, you would not be able to give that. You would say, buddy, I would have to take approval from the top board. And then I can only give you 500 physical boxes, and there has to be a business justification and so many things. I have to talk to the data center guy and see that if they have space available, and then have to stretch my network, and so many things I have to do over here. Okay. So scalability is also a big challenge. So all these problems that I'm talking about over here, You will run into these issues if you run only a physical environment. Okay. If you do not have any virtualization in your environment, only physical boxes, these are the challenges that you're bound to run into. Now, how is virtualization helping you over here? Let me answer that question. The first one, CAPEX. You do not have to worry about CAPEX. Why? Because when I have to provision a new machine, it's a virtual machine that I'm provisioning. I do not have to buy any hardware. On that same hardware, I am running 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 virtual machines. So I have a lot of capacity to host a lot of virtual machines on one physical box. Okay. I do not have to worry about data center bills because end of the day, it's only few physical boxes that I have in the data center. And on those physical boxes, I am running a lot of virtual machines. So you do not have to worry about basically, getting the space in the data center, paying more for the rack and the electricity and cooling. You do not have to worry about it. Yeah. The other concern that we had in the physical environment was utilization. Okay. So let's take an example. If on a physical machine, I am running 10 virtual machines, okay, I'm running 15 or 20 virtual machines on one physical box. If Windows 1 is not utilizing the resources, I can give those resources to Windows 2. I can give it to Windows 3. I can give it to Windows 4. If you don't need it, that's okay. There is someone else who needs it. I can give the resources to them. So there is a better management of the utilization that will happen. Okay. Lifecycle manager. Of course, after 5 years, I will have to throw away the boxes to get the new ones. However, that quantity will be very less. If I was running only a physical environment, I might have to do this activity on hundreds of servers. Here, I would have to do the activity on very limited number of servers. Yeah. Provisioning time, not a concern. If you need a Windows machine, I can give it to you in less than 2 minutes. A full functioning Windows machine that you can RDP in less than 2 minutes, I can give you a virtual machine. I do not have to worry about, placing an order with HP, getting the hardware, getting racked and stacked, installing the operating system, making sure the connectivity is there, and then, handing it over to you. I do not have to worry about that. In less than 2 minutes, you get a full-fledged operating system. No issues with the downtime. If my physical box on which the virtual machines are running, less than 5 minutes, you can time the watch, less than 5 minutes, all the virtual machines will be back online. Everything will be up. You will have ping connectivity and the applications will be back online. You do not have to do anything. This is all automated. So at 2 in the night, or maybe during a holiday or on a weekend, if your physical machine goes down, you do not have to worry about logging in to make sure that all the virtual machines come up and basically have to do a lot of manual efforts over there. You absolutely have to do nothing over there. If the physical machine goes down, no problem, wait for it. In less than 5 minutes, everything will be back online. All the virtual machines will start responding to the ping, and the application subsequently will be online as well. Okay. Talk about scalability. You need 500 virtual machines? Absolutely. I can do that in less than 30 minutes. I can do scripting, I can do a lot of automation, and I can give you 500 virtual machines in less than 30 minutes. Okay. And I do not have to worry about the data center bills and all that because I am not adding a new physical box. I am only running virtual machines, adding virtual machines on that same physical box. Okay. So this is how virtualization as a technology can help you overcome the challenges that you had only in a physical environment. Anyone has any doubts, confusion, questions, anything that I spoke about is not clear to you, please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask the question. Okay, yeah, go for it if you have any questions. Okay, now moving on. So we spoke of,
Excuse me. Excuse me. I have
go for it.
curiosity for the capacity, um, uh, capability of the VMware. What is more recommended or of the storage of the server, for example?
So you were basically, let me rephrase your question. Correct me if I'm wrong. So your query is, when you talk about VMware, what is the preference, the local capacity or the remote capacity
Mhm.
in terms of storage?
Exactly, exactly.
So when you talk about local storage or when you talk about remote storage, VMware gives you a flexibility of vSAN. vSAN is for those
Mm,
customers who cannot buy a dedicated hardware only for the storage. Okay. If you as
mhm,
an organization, you can buy a big physical box like Pure Storage, HP3 Power, Dell EMC,
mm,
VMAX.
that's
If you
right.
can buy all those boxes, great, fantastic. You have good amount of money. In case if you cannot buy that box, no problem. VMware has an alternative for you, and that's called a vSAN, wherein on your physical boxes, you can attach local SSD drives, and then you can utilize them and you can create the storage as well. So both the options are available. You want this, you can go with this. If you want a dedicated storage, you can also go with that. Both the options are available for you. Okay,
Oh, okay. Thanks for all. Mhm.
no problem. Okay, so the next thing is that we spoke about that what the challenges are, with a physical environment and how virtualization can overcome all those challenges. Okay. Now, let me talk about a term that was introduced which can help you with all these physical problems. Okay. The term that got introduced, which can help you with all these challenges, is basically called hypervisor. Okay. So you would have heard the term cloud. Okay. Now you have cloud from AWS, Azure, you know, Google, Alibaba, Oracle, IBM, OVH, basically HP, everyone gives you a cloud. Okay. Cloud is basically a terminology that anyone can use. Okay? Similarly, is the case with hypervisor. Hypervisor is a terminology that we're using over here. Okay. Now, what is a hypervisor? Now, a hypervisor can be an operating system or it can be an application. Okay. It can be a full-fledged operating system or it can be an application. Okay. So any operating system or any application that gives you the flexibility that is on one physical hardware, if you can run multiple virtual machines, okay? So any operating system or an application which can do this is called hypervisor, okay? So hypervisor can be an operating system, it can be an application, and their responsibility is to create a lot of virtual machines on one physical box. So if you can do that, you will be called a hypervisor. Okay. Now, let me give you an example. Let's say it's Christmas time or it's New Year. Okay. And Dell has a very good, promotion going on. They basically are saying that you can buy my laptop, you can buy a Dell laptop without any operating system. There is no operating system. Okay. And you can get it for a very reasonable price. Okay. You would say, sure, why not? You would go and you would buy that laptop. Okay. Now let's take an example. You already have a Windows 10 key with you. Okay. Let's say that you already have a Windows 10 operating system with you that you would like to use. Or if you don't have it, let's say that you say that I want to use the trial version of Windows 10. I do not want to buy the license key. That's okay. So I will keep reinstalling the Windows 10 operating system and I will keep using it. I mean, that is something technically you can do. Okay. Now, what will you do? You will get the ISO for Windows 10. Okay. And you will make your USB bootable because, nowadays you do not have a CD drive on the laptops. You basically have, only a USB. So you will make your USB bootable. So you will, burn this ISO on the USB. You will make the, USB bootable. And then what will you do? You will basically connect this USB to your laptop. You will connect the USB to your laptop and you will start the operating system installation. So what you are doing is the hard drive on the laptop was absolutely blank. There was nothing over here, no operating system, No application, nothing of that sort. It was a complete raw blank hard drive. What you did, you installed Windows 10 directly on the hard drive. Okay, why? Because Windows 10 is a complete operating system. That is why you were able to install Windows 10 directly on the hard drive. Windows 10 never said that, if you have to install me on a hard drive, you need to have a third party bootloader, or you need to, boot from floppy, or you need to do some fancy thing, and then only I will get installed. Windows never said that. Windows said, make me bootable, put me on a USB, and install directly on the hard drive. Okay. So what you're doing is you are installing Windows 10 directly on a hard drive because Windows 10 is a complete operating system. Okay. Similarly, you have the type 1 hypervisor. So there is something called as a type 1 hypervisor. Now, this type 1 hypervisor is a complete operating system. Just like Windows 10, it is a complete operating system. Now, what you do when you buy an HP server or a Dell server or an IBM server, on that server, you will have a local hard drive. Let's say that you have a hard drive over here. Okay. Now, what you will do, you will install the type 1 hypervisor directly on the hard drive. Like the way you were installing Windows 10 directly on the Dell laptop, similarly, you will install the type 1 hypervisor directly on the server's hard drive. Okay, you are not installing a Linux machine, you are not installing a Windows machine on the server. However, you are only installing and directly installing a type 1 hypervisor, which is a complete operating system directly on the server. Okay, so this is basically a type 1 hypervisor, which gets installed directly on the hardware. From VMware, the type 1 hypervisor is called ESXi. Okay? So ESXi is a type 1 hypervisor which is given by VMware now Broadcom, okay, and that you can install directly on the hard drive. Any questions still here? Okay, let's move on. Now, let me take you back to that example. So let's say on the Dell laptop that you have, on the Dell laptop, you installed Windows 10, okay, and things look okay. Now let's take an example. You have a movie file, okay, and you want to watch a movie on the laptop. You would say, I need an application. I need a software that can basically understand the movie file and it can play the movie. Okay. Now, if you want to play a movie, there are a lot of applications out there. Okay. One of them is basically a VLC media player. So what you will do, you will go to VLC website, and from there you will download the setup, you will install the setup, and then you can watch a movie, on that application. So what is VLC? VLC is a software. It is an exe file that you execute. Now, the question is, if you did not have Windows 10, let's take an example. If I was missing Windows 10, if my hard drive was completely blank, can I install the operating system? Sorry, can I install the software directly on the hard drive? That's not possible. I cannot do that. Okay. To install my exe file, I need an operating system as a base where it can get executed. Okay. So VLC is an application. It is an exe file. Similarly is the case with the type 2 hypervisor. So when I talk about type 2 hypervisor, this is an exe file from VMware. It is called a VMware workstation. Okay. And then you basically create virtual machines on it. So what will you do? You would have a physical desktop or a server. Let's take an example. Then you would install Windows 2019 as an operating system. Then you would install VMware Workstation as a type 2 hypervisor. And then you would be creating your virtual machines. This is what basically a type 2 hypervisor looks like. Doubts, confusion, questions. Okay. Let me draw the diagram for you so that it will be more clearer. So let's take an example. This is your physical machine. Here you've got CPU, you've got memory, you've got hard drive, and you've got the network cards. Okay. Now, on this physical machine, what you do is you install ESXi as an operating system directly on it. What is ESXi? ESXi is a type 1 hypervisor. It is a complete operating system. Okay. Once you have installed the ESXi, then what you do is you create virtual machines. So you create VM01, you install an operating system, you install an application. Similarly, you create another virtual machine, you install another operating system, another application, and so on. This is what you can do. Okay. This is a type 1 architecture. In a type 2 architecture, what will you do is that you will have a physical box. Let's say this is your physical machine. Okay. On this physical machine, what will you do is you will go ahead and you will install a Windows 2019 operating system or a Windows 10 operating system or a Linux operating system. Okay. Then on top of this operating system, you would go ahead and you would install VMware Workstation. What is VMware Workstation? It is a type 2 hypervisor. This is an exe file that you will install on this operating system. Okay. And then once this is done, then you will create your virtual machines, install the operating system, and install the applications. Okay. Now keep in mind, for productions, for enterprises, you always use a type 1 hypervisor. If there is something that you have to do at a personal level, if you have to do some personal learning at an individual level, training, then of course you can use a type 2 hypervisor. Okay. So this is what basically the architectural difference is between a type 1 and a type 2 hypervisor. Okay. Any questions, anyone?
Uh, the question is like after what configuration you will prefer the uh, physical server over the virtual. That means like I can see some of the organization are running VMware as well. Still, some of the server are running on the physical box. Direct Windows servers are there. So, is there any limit over which we can prefer physical rather than virtual?
In today's world, Pritesh, thank you for asking the question. In today's world, there is absolutely no scenario wherein I can tell you that you should prefer a physical box. If you had asked me this question 10 years back, I would have said yes. There are few things which are still not supported on VMware, and you should basically run them on the physical hardware. But in 2024, I would absolutely say no. There is no application that you cannot run on VMware. You talk about SAP, you talk about ERP, you talk about databases, you talk about Exchange, you talk about AI ML, you talk about your own private AI, you name it, and that can be executed on VMware. There is no application on earth that you cannot run on VMware. Kubernetes, telco cloud, banking, everything can run. I'll give you a small example. Folks who are not in India, for them this will be new. There is a bank in India that's called State Bank of India. That's a government owned bank, and that's one of the largest banks in India. People in India would absolutely know about it, but this is for folks outside India. So think about it, a government owned bank. Okay. And SBI is a huge bank. Okay, when I say huge, I literally mean huge. SBI is available in every town in India. I mean, you go to anywhere in India, from north to south or from east to west, in any town, any city, you will definitely find over there, SBI Bank and SBI ATM. I mean, that is a very common, across India that you will see. Now, SBI is a VMware customer. Okay, SBI heavily uses VMware. Okay, you talk about Airtel. Airtel, I mean, there are recordings that they were using VMware. In US, there is a company called Dish Company. I mean, you would see satellite TV channels and all that, they give you. They run heavily on VMware. Okay, so you have companies, across length and breadth, across different domains that use VMware as an application. Okay, so to Pritesh, to summarize your answer, I would say absolutely no. In today's world, there is no application that you cannot run on VMware, and it has to only be executed on a physical hardware. No, there is nothing like that. Okay.
Okay, even nor like yeah, there is any hardware limitations we can provide. Like let's say if user is requesting 256 GB RAM, so usually yeah, I have heard in organization they ask usually it been asked to prefer the physical box rather than the VMware. So this is not even limitations you mean, right?
Absolutely not. In a virtual machine, you can give 2 TB of RAM. So you create a virtual machine, and if your hardware supports it, you could run a virtual machine with 2 TB of RAM. Okay. So absolutely no concerns over there. So let me give you an example. You buy a Ferrari, okay, and you basically start driving that Ferrari on the streets. Is Ferrari limiting you to go till 100 or 200 kilometers per hour? No, it's the streets which are limiting you to go to that number. You cannot drive that, at that speed in the city. Okay, so VMware as a technology gives you full flexibility. It's about the hardware that you have. It's about the capabilities of the hardware, that you can give to your virtual machine. If you have that kind of a RAM on a physical hardware, you can absolutely give 2 TB of RAM to a virtual machine. No concerns over there.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Sir, I have one question, but it's oddly I asked. Sorry, that word oddly. I have yeah, I hear about that distributed switch and standard switch in VMware. Yeah.
When we will reach the networking section, there I will explain you everything on how it works and how it doesn't work. Right now, to talk about it, it's too early, Ashish.
Okay.
Okay. So if I start talking about it, people on the call will get confused. I am
Okay.
basically taking a step-by-step approach wherein I go from the very basics and then I will go slowly to the advanced topics and then I will talk about storage, networking, upgrade, anything and everything. I will talk about it in my training, but I have to take a gradual step-by-step approach. Sorry, I
Okay.
cannot talk about it right now.
Can you answer me yes or no for that question in my question? I hear about that distributed switch on that switch is created on vCenter, and if that switch is on created on vCenter, that time if vCenter is crashed, that switch is working or not working?
Working.
Working.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Let's move on. So, guys, I would like to highlight something over here. We are on Zoom. Okay. You're not seeing me. I am not seeing you. Okay. So I am assuming over here that if you do not ask questions, I would assume that you have understood that what I am telling you. Okay. Because there is no way for me to figure out that have you understood the topic or not. What I'm explaining you, is it clear to you or not? There is no way for me to figure it out. The only way I can figure it out is if you ask questions. If you're not asking questions, then I am assuming that you are getting whatever I'm telling you. Okay. If that's not the case, please unmute yourself and ask the questions. Like I mentioned earlier, let's make it interactive and always remember this training is for you. Okay. If you don't get benefit out of this training, there is no point of having this training. Okay.
Hello.
Go for it.
VMware is a software, right?
Absolutely.
What is the hardware suitable to be used?
I'll come to that part. When we do the ESXi installation, there I would show you what is the hardware you need to have, what are the challenges, how would you verify if your hardware is compatible or not. So how do you get the ISO? I'll talk all about those topics when I reach that section of installing the ESXi.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Anyone else, if you have any questions, go for it. Okay, let's move on. Hey, Omar, go for it.
Okay, hello, sir.
Hey, buddy.
Um, I spoke about,
Omar, I'm sorry to
I
interrupt you,
heard
but
you
your voice
spoke
is
of
not.
type 1 and type 2 hyperversmal. Okay, what I'm saying is,
Uh-huh.
can you repeat type 1 and type 2 hyperversions?
Sure. Absolutely. No concerns. So a
Okay.
type 1 hypervisor is basically like an operating system that you install directly on the hardware. On the hard drive, you install the type 1 hypervisor directly. That is what a type 1 hypervisor is. Like if you have to install Windows 10 on a laptop, you would install it directly on the hard drive. And when I talk about type 2, think about it as an exe file. Okay. So if you have to execute an exe file, you need an operating system, and then you can execute it. Okay. So that's the difference between a type 1 and a type 2. So a type 1 is a complete operating system which goes on the hard drive. A type 2 hypervisor is an exe file that you install on a Windows or a Linux operating system, and then you go ahead and create virtual machines. Does that answer your question, Omar?
Okay.
Cool.
I have one question.
Go for it.
Yes. Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yeah, Omar, your voice was breaking, buddy. So you might want to check your network once it was not clear. Hey, go for it, Prashant. You had a question.
My name is Shahid. So my question
Sorry.
is, yeah, thanks. My question, but I'm not sure because I'm too early for that. I have a question on EXXI. What is
Go
the
for it.
boot order for EXXI? If you can explain at an architect level how it boots.
So ESXi as a boot architecture, I would only let you know that VMware has some boot partitions. Okay. It is basically called a boot bank. Okay. There your operating system or your hypervisor gets installed, and from there it boots. There is as such no architecture over here, or there is nothing to talk more about it on how it is booting. I mean, there are no, backend files that I can tell you that, this loads up and that loads up and then it comes up and then it goes. I mean, there is nothing as such information mentioned in the VMware documentation. If you read the official documentation also, they would not talk about that how exactly it is booting or which files are getting loaded up. So that is something that you would not find. Only you would see that, the ESXi as an operating system creates multiple partitions in the backend. One of them is called a boot bank, where your operating system lives.
Oh, because recently I've been in interview and the same question has been come up. If you can tell me boot order with the step by steps. So that is the reason I asked. Okay.
See, when you talk about the boot order, they would be asking basically about a generic boot order wherein, the hardware passes the control to the BIOS and BIOS will then basically pass the control to the hard drive and then it will boot. I mean, if that's talking very specifically about the ESXi, I mean, this is something that I've not seen. I mean, as a generic order, we all know that, hardware does a post and then it gives the control to the operating system and then it basically boots up. This is how it is. But a very specific on tell me these steps. I mean, this is something that, I would have to figure it out, but I have not seen that. I mean
because normally what you can see the boot up order for Windows machines. So
True.
I was assuming the same thing, but I thought it maybe something different how ESXi boot up.
Yeah, I mean, you have to keep in mind, people do ask a lot of rubbish questions in interviews as well. So you do not have to take every question very seriously. So trust me, I've been working on VMware for close to about 15 years. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know about it, what the boot order is. Because I have never had a requirement to know about it. There is no need for you to know. I mean, there are so many things, that you can start digging into that, how a hard drive works and what are the things, how does the formatting works and what is the layer, which file comes into the picture. The question is, do you really need to know all these things? I mean, that's the point.
Yeah.
I mean, so in a nutshell, you don't need to know. I mean, I've been working on VMware for 15 years, but I've never had a need that, I had to know that what was the exact boot order, how ESXi boots. For God's sake, you don't need to know about it. I mean, it just boots up, buddy. I mean, if you have some issues, you will do troubleshooting based on the error, what it is. But yeah, I mean, even if you know about it, it's not going to help you. Yeah, so that's okay. Sometimes they do ask all these questions.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Now, let's talk about a couple of more points over here. Okay. So one of the concepts that we have in virtualization is basically called sharing. Sharing of what? Sharing of hardware resources. Now, what do you mean by sharing of hardware resources? Let me answer this question now. Okay. So like I was talking about earlier, If you have a physical machine, and on one physical machine, let's take an example that you have, for example, 500 GB RAM. Okay. Now on this physical machine, if you install Windows, so Windows is now controlling the entire 500 GB RAM. So Windows is basically under the control of 500 GB RAM. Okay. If you have installed SQL as an application over here, then SQL is basically asking for RAM. Now, if SQL needs only, I'm just taking an example, 300 GB RAM, then basically the remaining 200 GB RAM cannot be shared with anyone else. Okay. Because this is a physical machine, and that is the only operating system and the only application who's supposed to use this entire amount of RAM. It cannot be shared with anyone else. So that's the drawback that you have on a physical environment. Okay. Now let's tweak it around. Let's say that you have a physical environment. Let's say that you have a physical machine, and here you have 500 GB RAM. Okay. Now on this physical hardware, what do? I install ESXi. Okay. Now who controls the 500 GB RAM? It's the ESXi. Okay. Now what I can do is I can create over here a Windows operating system, and I can install SQL. I can install Red Hat over here, version 9 or version 8 or version 7, and then I can install the Nginx. I can install CentOS over here, and I can install Apache, or I can install any other application. Okay. Now, these machines are basically requesting RAM from ESXi. They are reaching out to ESXi, and they are basically saying that tell me or give me this amount of RAM. Okay. Now, for example, if Windows, I'm just taking an example, okay? If Windows had requested earlier for 100 GB RAM, and now it is only using 60 GB RAM, okay? So I have 40 GB RAM, which is available, okay? Windows is not using it. So ESXi has the flexibility that it can allocate this 40 GB RAM to someone else, okay? So ESXi is the boss for 500 GB RAM. He is the owner of the 500 GB RAM. If you don't need it, that's okay. I'll give it to someone else. When you need it, you let me know. I'll give you the RAM. If you don't need it, that's okay. I'm not going to hoard the RAM for you. I'm going to share it with someone else. So this is what basically means sharing of resources. If you don't need it, that's okay. I'll give it to someone else. The result is a better utilization of the hardware. Okay. When you buy a Windows or when you buy an HP hardware or when you buy a Dell server or an HP server, you do not buy that hardware thinking that I would only use 40% of RAM or I would only use 50% of RAM. If you got a hardware with 100 GB of RAM, you are basically assuming that you will be using close to about at least 70 to 80% of the RAM. Now, if your application is not able to use that amount of RAM, what would you do with the remaining amount of RAM which is not getting utilized? You cannot do anything about it. But if you had ESXi, if you had virtualization, it could have been shared with any other virtual machine. So that is what the benefit is when it comes to sharing of resources. Doubts, confusion, question. Okay. Now, the next thing.
I have a question, so I'm not sure whether I can ask now. So how actually the VM kernel drives into the ESXi kernel, how it will be function and how it will allocate the resource to the VMs.
Okay. So what would basically happen is there is something called as internal processes. Okay, and there is something called as schedulers in VMware. So schedulers are the one who are basically scheduling your request. If you have to do some CPU transactions, they are the ones who are responsible. And all these virtual machines, they run as a process on the ESXi. How exactly they request for the RAM? I mean, trust me, you do not have to know about it. Neither in this official training, it's anywhere mentioned that how exactly they are requesting for the RAM. Think about it as an application. Now, if I ask you, how is an application requesting RAM from the operating system? Of course, when there is a utilization, when the application is doing some job, some transactions, and if it needs some RAM, of course, it will ask for it and it will get the RAM. But if you ask me how exactly that is happening, Sorry, buddy, I don't have an answer for that. I'll be very honest and candid with you. Okay. So over here, when virtual machine as an operating system requires RAM, ESXi gives it. How exactly it is happening, which process is it giving? I mean, that is something I have never noticed. And I don't think so that you should also notice as well. I mean, because that's not required. I mean, it's good to know that you should understand, but trust me, in a real world environment, when you're managing the environment or when you're troubleshooting, it does not help. Okay, I'll be honest with you over there. Even today in consulting, I mean, you only talk about how your sizing will be of the hardware, what you have to do, what your architecture is, how the connectivity would happen, how things will shape up. But how exactly it is asking for the RAM? Sorry, I don't have that answer. Neither I think, you should be worried about, trying to get that answer. This is my personal take on this. Okay.
Okay, why I asked actually this one is sometimes actually we are doing the oversizing, right? And, so if we know that actually, then we can avoid that oversizing
No, no, no,
providing
no.
the RAMs or
That's
something.
no. That's a different approach. That's not the right approach. I'll give you answer to this. So this leads to my next topic, which is basically overcommitment. Okay. What is overcommitment? Let me answer this question. So for example, I've got a physical machine, and I'll keep the example simple right now. Let's say I've got 100 GB RAM on the physical hardware. Okay. What do I do on the physical hardware? I install ESXi as an operating system. Okay. Who controls the entire 100 GB RAM? It's the ESXi. Now, what I will do is I will go ahead and create a virtual machine. I created VM01, VM02, VM03, and VM04. I created 4 virtual machines. Okay. And every virtual machine, for example, let's say has 25 GB RAM. Now, this RAM that I've given to the virtual machine, it's called a virtual RAM. The RAM that you have on the physical box it is basically called physical RAM. Okay, and the RAM that you have on the virtual machines, it's called virtual RAM. Now, if you see that I have already provisioned 100 GB of virtual RAM. So I had 100 GB of physical RAM, and I have provisioned 100 GB of virtual RAM to all my virtual machines. But the concern over here is that my machines are only utilizing half the amount of RAM. Let's say this is utilizing 12 GB, this is utilizing 10 GB, this is utilizing 8 GB, and this is utilizing 14 GB. Okay. So overall, let's say that out of 100 GB, I am only utilizing 45 GB RAM, a hypothetical scenario. Okay. Let's say I am only utilizing 45 GB of RAM. Now, what will you do with the remaining 55 GB of RAM? So I will create virtual machines. So I will create a VM05. I will create a VM06. I will give them 25 GB RAM and I will give them 25 GB RAM. Okay. Now, when I power on these virtual machines, they are also utilizing only 15 GB RAM or only 12 GB RAM. They are not using the entire 100% of the RAM. Okay. So what have I done? My virtual RAM, which is allocated to all these virtual machines, is 150 GB. How much I have? I have only 100 GB. Why was I able to allocate more than 100 GB? Because VMware gives you a flexibility called overcommitment. Overcommitment means what you have, you can allocate more. Why you can allocate more? Because you know that your virtual machines will not be using all the RAM which is allocated to them. That is why you can overcommit. Overcommit is a scenario which is very common in VMware. Trust me, I have worked for pharmaceutical giants who make billions of dollars as a revenue. I worked for a paper company. They used to sell paper all around the world. And their revenue every quarter, I'm not talking about annual revenue, okay? I'm talking about every quarter, their revenue was in billions of euros they used to earn, okay? And in that environment also, we had overcommitment. So overcommitment happens, I mean, it used to happen 15 years back when I was working for that pharmaceutical company. And it happens even today. Even today, you have overcommitment which happens. I mean, I'm talking about 2024. This is a very common scenario because you know whatever you have given to your virtual machines, they will not be utilizing entire amount of RAM. That is why you overcome it. Okay. And the best way to look at it, when you should overcome it or when you should not overcome it, VMware gives you a bottleneck of 80%. VMware says to keep your environment healthy and better, never go beyond 80%. Keep all the utilization, that is CPU, memory, network, hard drive, keep it below 80%, and you as a system admin will have a very perfect and a normal and a happy life. The day you start going above 80%, that is, you are hitting the bells and, you are hitting the warning buttons over there. Any questions, anyone? Let me know. Okay. Now, hypothetical scenario. I was able to create a fifth virtual machine and I was able to create a sixth virtual machine over here because my 4 virtual machines had less utilization. Okay. So when I have 4 virtual machines, I've given 25 GB RAM to them. If they are not utilizing entire amount of RAM, what I can do, I can go ahead and I can create, a couple of more virtual machines. Why? Because my utilization is still low. Okay. Now, let me change the scenario. Let's take an example. I've got a physical machine. Here I've got 100 GB RAM. Okay. Now on this physical machine, what do? I install ESXi. Okay. Now here I create 4 virtual machines. So let's say I create VM01, VM02, VM03, and VM04. Okay. I give 25 GB RAM to all of them. Now let's take an example. They are using entire 100% of the utilization. Everyone is using 100%. Now my question is, can I create a fifth virtual machine, VM05? Can I give 25 GB RAM and can I power it on? Yes or no? What do you guys think? Come on, don't be shy and mute yourself. What do you guys think? Can I create a fifth virtual machine with 25 GB RAM and can I power it on?
If
It's
all are
not
using their
possible.
100%, then probably no.
Okay, who says yes, we can do it?
The expenses is available in this VMware. It's not. I know. I don't like.
Okay, my question is, can I create a fifth virtual machine and can I power it on? That's the
Yes,
question.
yes, we can.
I can?
Yes, I.
From where will I get the RAM? If I can do this, 100 GB RAM is already utilized over here. This is all used up. Where will this virtual machine get the RAM from? You need to share the pool? Nah.
No.
Okay, let me answer that question. So my question was, technically, okay, so my question is, technically, can you power on this virtual machine? Answer is yes. Technically, you can power on this virtual machine. Now, my question is, theoretically, should you power on this virtual machine? My answer is no. You should not power on this virtual machine.
No.
Now, coming back to the question, if you power on this virtual machine, what will happen? Okay. The
Conflict.
problem is you will have performance problem on all the virtual machines. Why? Because you do not have RAM. This virtual machine reaches out to the ESXi and it says, I want RAM. ESXi says, I don't have RAM. VM05 says, I do not care. I want RAM. Now, this virtual machine is fighting for RAM. This virtual machine is saying that I need RAM and it is very adamant. Now, ESXi is in a flux. What to do? I cannot give RAM. What will happen is it will basically start giving performance problems to all the virtual machines that you have on the ESXi. Okay. So technically, yes, you can power on the virtual machine. You can even create a sixth virtual machine and you can power it on with 25 GB RAM. There is no one stopping you. Technically, you can do that. But theoretically or morally, should you do that? Absolutely no, you should not do that. Why? because you have to only target 80% of the utilization. Never go beyond 80% of the utilization in a VMware environment. Doubts, confusion, question. Okay.
I have a
All right,
question.
go for it.
In case the whole 100 GB is used for the RAM for all the four VMs, and the VM is still demanding for some more, so how do we get, like, from where do we get this?
So when you create a virtual machine, and let's take an example, you gave 25 GB RAM. Okay. Now think about a scenario. I've got this Windows machine right now, and on this Windows machine, if I show it to you over here, I have 100 GB RAM over here. So what does Windows think about it? Windows says that I can use 100 GB of RAM because this is what I see over here, 100 GB of RAM. Now my question to you is, can I use 101 GB RAM over here? I cannot, because if my machine sees only 100 GB of RAM, that is what I can use. I do not have flexibility of going beyond and above. Similarly, when you create a virtual machine, and if you only allocate during the creation of the virtual machine, and you give only 25 GB of RAM, operating system, what it sees 100 over here, will only see 25 GB. And it can then use only 25 GB. There is no artificial intelligence over here, wherein if the utilization of the operating system is 100%, this will automatically switch to 26 or this will automatically switch to 27. This cannot happen on its own. If you want to increase the RAM to 27 or to 26 GB, absolutely you can do it. But VMware as a platform, as a technology, will not automatically change the RAM to 27 GB or to 26 GB if the utilization touches 100% over here. Does that answer your question, ma'am?
Sorry, sir, that's not my question.
Okay,
So
go for
for
it.
one host, the whole 100 GB is used by the different VMs. So if I
Right.
need one more, if I say one VM needs some 10 more GB of RAM, so do we have to have external, what do we say, in an external way we can add some more memory, or
No,
like you have to get one more host?
you have to get one more host.
Okay.
Or the other, which is a cost-effective solution that happens in the environment is, and that I used to do a lot and that happens everywhere is a lot is, for example, every motherboard. Let me show you a photograph of a motherboard. Okay, give me 1 minute. Huh? So if I go over here and I type motherboard computer, go to images. Okay. You see this diagram over here? Hey, if you don't have a question, please go on mute. Okay. So if you look at this photograph over here, here you see RAM cards. These are basically the RAM slots, okay, where you would put basically RAM. Now let's take an example. If you had over here one card of 16 GB, what you do is you basically swap them with 32 GB. Okay. This is the most cost-effective way of increasing the RAM on an ESXi. However, you need to make sure that your hardware supports it. If you have 32 GB of card on every slot, you swap it with 64. 64 with 128, with 128, with 256. This is what you do. And this is how you can get your RAM up. However, if your ESXi has a utilization of 100%, no, there is absolutely no way that I can give you RAM in any other way.
Okay. Yeah, got it. Thank you.
No problem. Anyone else has any question? All right, folks, I'll keep it till here for today. Let's meet tomorrow. And tomorrow we'll proceed and we'll talk about the ESXi installation, on how it happens, what are the things that you have to take care of, what are the prerequisites, and what every screen means during the installation. And the very first screen is super duper important. If you miss that first screen, I mean, you would have a lot of concerns later on. Okay. So let's meet tomorrow, same time, 6 o'clock Indian time. And we'll continue further and we'll talk about the installation. I'll show you in the lab on how the installation happens and how to go about it. Okay.
Hello.
Yeah, go for it.
Sir, you saying about vSphere, but in our office, they trying to get all things are in VCF. Then what is the VCF?
So VMware has a lot of products.
Hmm.
Okay. So they have ARIA, they have NSX, they have
Right.
vSAN, they have software defined networking. Okay. So what
Mhm.
is VCF? It's like a bundle.
Okay.
They are basically giving you a package, a custom made package for you. You get all my applications, you get this, you get that, and this is the amount that you have to pay. If you buy all those applications independently, your cost will be super high. Okay. So what do I
Okay.
do? I create a package for you that's called a VCF. Okay. You get that
Okay.
package, you get so many applications, and you can use all of them to make your solution work better. That is what a VCF is.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Okay, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow and we'll continue further. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.